Eric Richins, 39 years old, a father, a husband, a very successful businessman, was found dead in his bed. What the cause was? A very lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. But you see, Eric doesn't do illicit drugs. His wife, Kouri Richins, says that Eric may have the occasional THC gummy. And how do we go from having a THC gummy to having almost 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in your system? Now, what at first appeared to be maybe a tragic accident initially has since become one of the most wildest and most deeply layered murder case that we've covered. I keep saying this case is almost as wild as the Alec Murdaugh case. There are a lot of elements to it. The accused is accused of doing a lot of wild, crazy things. It's not just like one thing is happening. No, it's like we got affair, we got financial ruin, we got possible attempt of poisoning. It's wild. And not only that, after she was arrested, I think it gets even more wilder. But we're going to cover everything that's happened so far in the recent court documents. Hey guys, my name is Kouri. I've been covering cases like this. We're covering Kouri Richins, we're covering Brian Koberger, Donna Adelson. There's a lot of cases that are coming up, so make sure you guys subscribe, have your notifications on to all. That way you guys know when there's new information out. And usually we'll do some live streams where we'll read out the court documents for you guys. There's a lot that's happening right now, so we're just trying to make sure we cover everything. But I appreciate you guys being here and enjoy the rest of the video. This is the story of Kouri Richins, a wife accused of murdering her husband. Now, not in a moment of rage. No, this was a cold, calculated, well planned out. Well, okay, well planned out. We'll put that in quotation marks there. But it was fueled by money, secrets, and desperation. She even wrote a book for her 3 young children. Yes, she has kids. She is accused of murdering the father of her children, but she wrote a book for her kids in order to help them with grief. Or maybe she just wanted money. I don't know. Maybe she was trying to profit off his death. There's some accusations thrown out there.
You know, I just watched the struggle that my kids were going through and trying to find something that we could use to cope at nights. Nights are the hardest, it seems like, for everybody when, dealing with anything. And I just could not find anything. I couldn't find anything that really, suited them or helped them find comfort and peace. And so, I was like, let's just write one.
Now, you might be familiar with Kouri Richins. I would say she blew up definitely because of the walk the dog letter. It was all over the media, and she was basically accused of attempting to elicit false testimony from her brother. Now, because at this point, it seems like the story has changed. Kouri wants the world to think that no, Eric does do drugs, not just regular drugs, not the THC gummies, but illicit drugs, and that he would go to Mexico to procure the fentanyl. But, she also claimed that this letter was an attempt at witness tampering. She was like, no. This letter was actually part of a 65-page novel that I was working on. What are you talking about? I was working on this fictional story about how somebody escapes jail, goes to Mexico, and then gets incarcerated. In my last video where we covered Kouri Richins, you guys should definitely check it out if you haven't already, but the state goes into some details about how Kouri Richins, while being incarcerated, was orchestrating some things with her family members about getting things out into the media about Eric Richins doing drugs. So definitely check that video if you guys haven't already, but it's kind of wild. It's kind of wild how people will do things while incarcerated, because a lot of your phone calls, your movements, they're being recorded. It's going to be used against you in court. And listen, when the state, when they come across these jailhouse phone calls and they got something they might use against you, they're probably salivating at the mouth. So be careful what you say in these jailhouse calls. Or don't, because, we like to listen to them. Kouri Richins' financial troubles weren't just stress-inducing. That's putting it very lightly. According to prosecutors, they were potentially a motive for murder. Now, back in 2019, Kouri Richins took out a $250,000 home equity line of credit, also known as a HELOC, and this was without Eric's consent. Now, when he found out almost a year later, during October 2020, he jumped on, hired an estate planning attorney, and then also hired a divorce attorney. Now, you could probably say that during that time, their relationship probably grew really tense. Apparently, Kouri had promised to repay it, and she led Eric to believe that she did pay it. But when he died in 2022, not only was it not paid off, it was actually overextended by $254,000. Remember, the initial loan was 250K. The state argues that this is part of a pecuniary gain that Eric's death would eventually, or I guess not eventually, what's the word I'm looking for? That Eric's death would essentially wipe the slate clean and that she wouldn't have to deal with a confrontation between her and Eric. This is the state's theory. And then we got the good old affair. Apparently, Kouri Richins was having an affair with a man named Joshua Grossman. Now, in a previous videos that we did, we covered some of the text messages between the two of them leading up to the death of Eric Richins. Joshua Grossman had apparently, in their communications, referred to the relationship as 6 years. Kouri doesn't do anything or say anything to correct him. Now, when we're thinking 6 years, is it 6 years of friendship that led to a relationship, or was it 6 years of romance? Because think about it. Kouri and Eric, they were married, I think, in 2012. Eric died in 2022. So if it was 6 years of romance, basically halfway through the relationship with Eric, she was already having an affair with a new guy. If we're going with the 6 years timeline, that's fucking crazy. Now, what's even more shocking, or is it really shocking, Kouri? Is it? Kouri had booked a romantic getaway. Get this, guys. The name of the resort is Secrets Resorts in St. Martin. Again, it's supposed to be romantic. It's an all-inclusive adult affair. I mean, who's going to be watching her 3 kids, though? I guess I'm assuming maybe Eric Richins. Oh, wait, actually, no, because Kouri Richins had booked this vacation date for a date after Eric Richins' death. But she did book it before he died. Now, apparently, a couple days after Eric Richins had died, not only was she maybe grieving, she apparently texted her lover, "Are we there yet?" Like, we're not even grieving. We're just like, okay, you know what? Eric's dead. Done deal. I guess he's done. Let's move on to the next relationship. Let's go vacationing together. I wonder how that would look. I mean, who would be watching the kids? I guess you would just have the family to watch the kids, I guess. Because at that point, Eric would have been dead. So the state is arguing that this isn't just your normal, infidelity, but this is evidence of intent. She was planning on having a future without Eric Richins. Now, apparently, Kouri Richins had possibly explored divorcing Eric Richins. She even consulted an attorney named Marie Bramwell, but ultimately, she didn't follow through. Now, the state has this theory that the reason why she didn't follow through is because in the premarital agreement, Kouri Richins doesn't get an interest in C&E Masonry, which is Eric Richins' company that he has built and has become very successful with. Now, however, Kouri Richins does gain an interest in C&E Masonry if Eric dies while being married to Kouri Richins. Now, there was a subpoena that was served to this divorce attorney, and the divorce attorney has asked the subpoena to be quashed because she has a vacation that's been planned 5 months now for during the time frame of the trial. I think it's like in May or something. And then also, I think she's also asserting that there might be some privileged conversations between Kouri Richins and the attorney. Now, I think the state did mention that they're not looking for privileged conversations between the two of them. The judge has not made a ruling on this yet, so we'll see what the judge decides regarding this divorce attorney, whether or not she has to show up for her subpoena. Because, man, I get it. It's vacation season. It's coming up. The weather is getting nicer. People have their planned trips. They're taking vacation off. They want to spend time with their family. They want to get some self-alone time. And what's the last thing you want to do? The last thing you want to do is go to a trial, testify, and be in a courtroom. Now, if you were the victim's family, you'll probably think differently, but I can see why people don't want to be involved in stuff like this. This goes back to the state prosecutor's argument that this is a motive with a financial benefit. It was uncovered that the Richinsons owed about over $300,000 in unpaid federal taxes. There was also a $10,000 property taxes that was owed. And at this point, Kouri's business accounts were in complete disarray. There were bounced checks, there were overdrafts, and there was also a pending lawsuit from, I think it's called Green Grass Holdings, for $87,000 in damages. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Eric Richins didn't know about what was going on with Kouri and the finances. The state has said that this wasn't Eric's doing, that the federal income taxes, he actually had money set aside that he would pay, I think either twice a year or maybe quarterly. And Kouri Richins, instead of using that money and paying the taxes, she would tell Eric's accountant that, yeah, I paid those, but really take that money and then use it to funnel into her own business to keep it afloat because she wanted to have this image that her business was successful. You know, she was a successful realtor, that she was flipping these houses and making a profit. When in fact, any money that she got a hold of, she would use that money, she would take it. And then she would use it to repay back the old debts and then just continually keep cycling it, hoping to keep this business alive to make it seem like, hey, I am successful. I am a good businesswoman. Apparently, the day before Eric's death, Kouri Richins was on the phone with the IRS for about an hour and 40 minutes. Kouri's bank accounts were in such financial disarray. They hired this expert to go through the accounts of Kouri's and Eric's and all their financial stuff. And they noticed that Kouri's stuff was all over the place. The state accused Kouri being really desperate to forestall a financial collapse. At some point, she had about 198 overdraft and return transactions fees. And then there was that lawsuit. There was a lawsuit for breach of contract where they're seeking about $87,000. The state said that Kouri Richins did not have the financial wherewithal to either defend herself or repay back these people. And here's another example of a financial collapse. This is involving her best friend, apparently, Chelsea Barney. Now, this is a house that Kouri Richins had purchased, and she actually had 4 high-interest loans that were tied to this house, totaling over $450,000. She attempted to refinance this into a traditional 30-year mortgage, and she was going to have her best friend at the time, I don't know if they're her best friends, actually, probably not. She was going to have her best friend buy the home in a seller finance deal. The best friend was going to do a 30-year mortgage, pay $2,900 of rent to Kouri Richins, and then there would be an option for her to buy the home at $490,000. Now, her best friend wired $45,000 to Kouri Richins. This was supposed to be used as a down payment towards the home. The best friend moved in, got her husband, her children to move in there. And Kouri Richins had used some of this money to pay off some of the loans that she had instead of using towards a down payment. Within 10 days of receiving this money, the entire $45,000 was reportedly gone. She had used it to pay back the loans. This was her best friend's life savings, and the refinance ended up failing. The 30-year mortgage lender, they ended up revoking the deal, and then they gave a different deal, but it was less favorable. Now, I don't know what happened to the best friend, the house. It seems like she might have gotten scammed $45,000, but we'll have to wait for her to testify at the trial. Correspondence between the defendant and the best friend established that this was a down payment intended for a long-term mortgage, supposedly closing January 18, 2022. Immediately prior to the best friend's wires entering the account, the balance in the account was, I'm assuming, negative $1,996.68. As soon as the first wire entered the account, and before the second wire entered the account, the defendant transferred $19,299 of her best friend's down payment to her own personal account to cover a wire transfer of exactly $19,299 to FundFi, an entity to which the defendant had taken out a high interest accounts receivable loans related to this property. By January 19, 2022, so this is a day after January 8, when the long-term mortgage was supposed to close, the defendant had entirely spent the remainder of her best friend's $45,000 down payment. On that same day, her KRR account balance was $227.69. The refinancing did not take place in January 2022. Kouri Richins was forced to enter into another extension agreement with the largest hard money lender on February 16. And then again, that was extended to March 8, 2022, which would have been 4 days after Eric Richins' death. The state has also alleged that Kouri Richins fraudulently transferred her own mother's home title to Kouri Richins Realty and then took out a $135,000 loan against it. Now, they're planning on using this against Kouri Richins if she plans on testifying at trial, which I hope she does because she has a lot of explaining to do. Now comes in more evidence about the drug trail. Not only did Kouri Richins reach out to Carmen Lauber to obtain fentanyl, But apparently, she had also reached out to another individual. His name is Hayden Jeffs, and his girlfriend overheard the conversation about how Kouri Richins had reached out trying to get propofol and fentanyl. Now, propofol is what Michael Jackson had died of. Apparently, propofol is not like a street drug. It's actually a prescribed thing. It's like an analgesic or some sort of thing they use for anesthesia. And if you have too much of it, you can get poison. The girlfriend of Hayden Jeffs overheard this conversation where Hayden Jeffs was like, yeah, like, no, I'm not going to get this for you. Like, I'm good. But I do wonder, though, I did hear about how there was a witness in this case that Kouri Richins went to. And then they actually ended up dying, I think, a couple months ago by being hit by a car, I think, or a truck or some sort of like vehicle accident. I don't know if this is the same individual or not. Now, remember, according to police, Kouri Richins ended up obtaining fentanyl, possibly twice, and she gave it to Eric Richins in some sort of like mix. Because initially, we all thought that it was in a Moscow Mule, right? But I mentioned this in my live stream. When you're drinking a Moscow Mule, you're like sipping it, you're drinking it. You would probably be able to taste the bitterness of the fentanyl, the nastiness in the drink. I think they have switched their theory to it was given in a shot glass. So that would make sense. It was given in a shot. You would take that shot, you would swig it back really quickly, and then you wouldn't really taste it until after you consumed it. Maybe after you might be like, oh, that kind of tasted weird, or oh, it was kind of bitter. And remember, the autopsy revealed that Eric Richins had about 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. I think that was equated to possibly 20 pills. You know, 1 or 2, maybe in an accident. 20 pills, that's a whole different story. That's when you start looking at possible, suicide notes. That's when you start looking at maybe a homicide. 20 pills accidentally, that just looks highly suspicious, especially if this person didn't have a history of using fentanyl. Now, did Kouri Richins come to the realization that did she do all this for no reason? Was it all in vain? Did she end up getting fucked over by Eric Richins? Apparently, after Eric Richins died, she had told people that she was planning on selling the Willow Court home, the home that was their marital home that they were living in. And so the next day, Eric Richins' sister actually told Kouri that, you don't own the home. The Eric Richins Living Trust actually changed the trustee from you over to me. Now, remember that meeting that Eric Richins had back in October 2020 when he found out that Kouri Richins had taken that HELOC and didn't tell her? He made it with the estate planning attorney and then also a divorce attorney. Well, during that time, that's when he changed some stuff over because he realized, I don't know if I can trust Kouri Richins. Probably. And so when Kouri Richins realized that she was not the trustee of the Living Trust, she had a fucking meltdown. Not only did she punch the sister, she went outside. She was like, I think like cradling herself, rocking herself back and forth. She was like having a panic attack and she lost it. She was screaming.
She looked at me with pure hatred and rage. I was messing up her plan. I was getting in her way. And because of that, she attacked me. She punched me in the face and neck multiple times. It took 4 people to pull her off me that day. Before the funeral, Kouri opened a bank account and asked everyone that was grieving to send her money instead of sending the family cards and flowers. It was not even 2 weeks after Eric's passing that we were told she had taken down all but 1 photo of my brother and removed all his clothing from the house.
The state said that she really thought the home would become hers after Eric Richins' death, and that possibly, maybe, she desperately needed the ownership of this home, sell it, and then get the proceeds to fund all the fucking shit that was happening in her business that was falling apart. Now, after Eric's death, investigators, they found that Kouri Richins had actually deleted almost nearly all of her text messages and data 2 months leading up to Eric's death and 2 weeks afterwards. They believe that this was a conscious effort to cover her tracks, that this shows evidence of guilt. Now, on top of that, her communications with the drug dealer, Carmen Lauber, technically Carmen Lauber was like kind of like the middleman between her and the drug dealer and Kouri Richins, but communications between Carmen Lauber and Kouri Richins spiked 3 days before the attempted aggravated murder and then 5 days after the charged aggravated murder. Now, if you're like, Kouri, what do you mean by attempted aggravated murder? I think this ties to the egg sandwich story. And you're like, what the fuck is the egg sandwich story? The state believes Kouri Richins had actually tried to poison Eric Richins a couple weeks before on Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, Kouri Richins went out, bought an egg sandwich, left it for Eric Richins, and let Eric consume it. During the time when Eric Richins fell sick, Kouri Richins was actually with her paramour at this time. And so prosecutors believe this was an attempt to poison Eric. And then when she realized, well, that wasn't enough, well, she learned from her mistake and then she did better on the day of Eric's death.
But she learned. She learned she needed something stronger. She also learned how to administer it. She learned that putting it in a sandwich where Eric Richins could take a bite, feel the effects, set the sandwich down, was not the proper way to administer a fatal dose of fentanyl. Instead, she administered it with a lemon shot, where Eric Richins would throw it back all at once. She says that in her journal article, her journal note at Exhibit 49. And she learns that it takes a truckload of fentanyl to kill him. She learns that one bite in a sandwich isn't enough. It has to be stronger, it has to be administered at once, and it has to be a lot. And that's why Eric Richins' toxicology shows 5 times the lethal amount in his blood and 20,000 nanograms per milliliter remaining in his gastric fluid.
Now, as the case is heading very, very close to trial is going to be happening in a couple of weeks. The defense team has filed multiple motions to suppress or motions to exclude key piece of evidence. And the judge's ruling in it are pretty detrimental to them, I would say. The judge has ruled what evidence, what statements can be used against Kouri Richins in the trial. Some were tossed out, but mostly they survived. The next portion, we're going to break down the March 24, 2025, well, that was a couple weeks ago, ruling on some of the defense's motion to suppress evidence and statements and what it's going to mean for the case moving forward. Let's start with the first motion. This is the April 13, 2022, the traffic stop. So on April 13, detectives were executing a search warrant and they saw Kouri Richins leaving the house in her SUV. One detective decided to follow her. He turns on his lights, he pulls her over and he's got on the law enforcement outfit. He's got the jacket, the badge. So she knows that he was part of law enforcement. He ordered Kouri Richins to get out of the car and he was able to visibly see her cell phone in her lap. However, when she gets out of the car, she leaves the phone behind, the keys behind, and the detective told her, you're not under arrest, but you got to sit with me in the front seat and you have to wait until other officers arrive to tell you what's going on. So she sits there, she waits for about 21 minutes, and then another detective, Detective Woody, appears and asks Kouri Richins some questions, basically telling Kouri Richins that, Eric Richins had fentanyl in his system and that's what he died of. It was a fentanyl overdose, and then proceeds to ask her some other questions about it. They explained some of the evidence so far and that Eric Richins died of fentanyl overdose. That's an illicit drug, and how could have Eric Richins obtained it? And of course, Kouri answers, and this is what she says.
The ME's toxicology results showed fentanyl in Eric Richins' blood.
This is coming from Detective Woody, right?
This is coming from Detective Woody. She said, we're searching your house. We're looking for fentanyl. It's dangerous.
Right.
You have kids coming in and out the house. The defendant said something like, fentanyl? What is that? Cut crack? That's the blurt.
Okay. That's helpful context. I appreciate that.
Officer Woody then says, you're welcome to go back home if you want. You can't go in until we're finished, but you can do whatever you need. And so the defense is arguing that any statements Kouri Richins made during this time, it needs to be suppressed, that this was a custodial interrogation and that she wasn't properly Mirandized. And the judge, well, he agreed with the defense. He said that this was a violation of Kouri Richins' Fifth Amendment right, that she was in a custodial interrogation. Anyone in her position would have known that, well, okay, I'm getting pulled over. There's emergency lights, law enforcement. Well, they're wearing the badge. They're wearing the outfit. They're ordering her out of the car. They're essentially being detained in the police vehicle for about 20 minutes. and that anyone in her shoes would believe that they weren't free to leave. The judge also notes that the custodial interrogation began the moment the first detective spoke to Kouri Richins until the second detective, Detective Woody, came and told her that she was free to go. So this is a win for the defense. Now, moving on to the second motion, we have the seized iPhone and then also them getting the passcode from Kouri Richins. Now, initially, when we heard about the passcode, I wasn't sure if they forced her to give the passcode. It was like, hey, give me the passcode or you can't leave. But then we get some background story and how, the context of like why the passcode was given. So Detective Woody instructs Kouri Richins to go back with the first detective to go back to the car and retrieve the phone. Kouri goes back to the car and she drives the vehicle back to her home. She partially pulls it into the garage. And at that point, there's like 10 law enforcement there that are doing the search warrant. They're searching the home for some stuff and they don't give her any instructions. Kouri Richins grabs the phone, gives it to the detective. And again, she wants to get the contacts out of it. So what does she do? She tells the detective the passcode. The detective enters it in and probably memorizes it, because that's good information right there, and then gives her the contacts from the phone. Later that day, the police, they ended up getting a search warrant for Kouri Richins' vehicle. The defense is going to argue that law enforcement violated Kouri Richins' Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights by taking and seizing this white iPhone. Now, this time, the judge, they're going to side with the state. The judge has gave 3 different reasons. His ruling found that the seizure of this white iPhone was legal under 3 grounds. The first one, law enforcement had a search warrant for Kouri Richins' person, and they would have gotten the phone anyways. The second one is Kouri Richins voluntarily handed over her phone and technically voluntarily handed over the passcode as well. And then third, the judge did say that, the phone could have been taken anyway under the automobile exception because it was visible and it linked to a potential aggravated murder. The judge did say that the detective at the time did have probable cause that the phone may contain information involving the aggravated murder. Because remember, if you're being accused of poisoning someone, it most likely just didn't happen spur of the moment on the fly. There probably was some meticulous planning, use a phone to make, some phone calls, some text messages. And so that phone, if it wasn't seized at that moment, it's possible that evidence could be lost. So because of the automobile exception, the phone could have been seized anyway. Now remember, Fourth Amendment protects you from unlawful searches and seizures. Now moving on to the Fifth Amendment. Judge is going to argue that, Kouri Richins, she at this point wasn't in custody at the time. Remember, the Detective Woody, told her that she was free to go wherever she wanted. And Kouri Richins was the one who decided to go back to her car. And instead of driving anywhere else, she drove back to the house, gave the phone to law enforcement. So the judge said that she wasn't in custody. There's no need for the Miranda to be read to her. And she was free to go wherever she wanted. But here's the thing. If Kouri Richins did decide to leave and dip out at that point, I feel like they still went after her. I don't know. Maybe she was free to go. So despite the defense's effort, the phone, its contents during the seizure is going to be admissible for trial. Okay, so now let's go to the next motion that I want to focus on. This is the April 14, 2023 in-home interview. Now, there was a lot of contention about what went on, whether or not detectives knew Kouri Richins had representation. There's a whole thing about that, but let me just focus on giving you guys just like the main details. So Detectives O'Driscoll and who's the other one? Hoffmeyer. Detective Hoffmeyer knocked on Kouri's door. The day before, Kouri Richins' attorney at the time had reached out to law enforcement and said, hey, I'm asserting her right to counsel. I represent her. But at that time, Kouri Richins was not arrested. No charges had been filed. And so the next day, we have these new set of detectives. They are new to the case. They are stopping by Kouri Richins' house. They're introducing themselves like, hey, I'm the new detective. I'm here. I'm going to be investigating the death of Eric Richins. And Kouri Richins, she welcomed them inside her own home. This is what she said. I think this is great. I'm actually glad that you guys are here. And they speak for about over an hour. It was like an hour and like 30 minutes or something like that. She gives her version of how Eric died that night. This is her firsthand account of night of Eric's death, the facts, the circumstance of his death. We talk about the timeline, her movements in the house, what Eric consumed, Kouri's finances, and life insurance on Eric. They were talking about that too. Damn, okay. And so at some point, Kouri's Richins' mom walks in and was like, are you supposed to be speaking to your attorney present? Like, hello, what's going on here, man? Kouri replied, oh, I have nothing to hide. I'm so grateful that they're here. Now, here's what the defense is going to argue. The defense is going to argue that this violated her Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. Now, I'm pretty sure Fifth Amendment is the right to representation, and the Sixth is like not making any incriminating statements against yourself, I think. Or maybe I have them mixed up. Let me look it up really quick. Fifth Amendment protects you or individual from self-incrimination, and then Sixth Amendment gives you a right for representation of counsel. So the judge wasn't buying it. The judge's ruling says that this was not a custodial interrogation, that at this point, no judicial proceedings had begun against Kouri Richins, and that she made no attempts to stop the interview. As a matter of fact, she welcomed it. Her Sixth Amendment was not violated because the state had not initiated judicial proceedings against Kouri yet. And then her Fifth Amendment, Kouri was actually not in custody. She expressed gratitude and did not ask law enforcement to leave. So what the result was, the interview is going to be admissible for trial. Now, the fourth motion, this is the orange notebook, guys. I'm telling you, she might have kept a diary. I don't know. This is, let's learn more about what was in this orange notebook. Oh my goodness. This is a very mysterious piece of evidence. So the orange notebook was handwritten by Kouri Richins. It was seized from her home on May 8, 2023. I think this was the same day that she was arrested, actually. It reportedly includes a journal entry. I think like the first 3 pages basically documented the night of Eric's death. We got timelines, we got movements, and then we got what he consumed. But here's the problem. The original search warrant did not cover any documents or writings. So when law enforcement initially seized it, well, the state had conceded that this was unlawful. So in order to cure it, law enforcement quickly executed a second search warrant, which covers the documents and stuff that's in writing. Now, did law enforcement technically break the rules? Yes, technically they did, but practically, I guess not. There were multiple search warrants that were executed after that date. We got May 31st, we got October 31st, November 6th, and December 15. And so each of those search warrants would have authorized the seizures of the documents. Now, here's the thing. Although initially it was taken unlawfully, the court does say this. Kouri Richins was arrested that day. The house was under the possession of the living trust. And so the trustee was the one who was handling it. So the only people that had access to that house after Kouri's arrest would have been the trustee, law enforcement, the private investigator that was hired, and then the person that had temporary guardianship of the 3 children. So based on the very limited access, and the only person that came in to remove stuff from the house was a temporary guardian who came in to remove some stuff for the children, the orange notebook would have most likely been discovered anyway at the subsequent search warrants that were executed. So the court said because of this, oh, sorry, I don't have my notifications turned off. The court says because I don't have asthma. The court says because of this, the notebook would have never been moved, hidden, or removed, and law enforcement would have got a hold of it anyway, even though initially when they first got a hold of it, it was unlawful for them to. So let's recap. Statements made during the April 13 traffic stop, suppressed. The seized iPhone and the passcode, admissible. The orange notebook, also admissible. And then any statements she made during the April 14 interview at her home, also admissible. The defense, they got a small victory, but I still think the state has so much ammunition against Kouri Richins. And as the trial draws closer in the next couple of weeks, every ruling, every witness, every key piece of evidence could be a major difference between Kouri Richins' guilt or freedom. So those are the major updates from the court documents in the Kouri Richins case. Now, I recommend you guys, like I said, watch the live stream because I read all the documents for you because, why spend your time and read it yourself when you can be multitasking and I can read it for you in the background. Also, if there's anything in the documents that I've not covered, I may miss, or, if there's anything in those documents that you guys might have a different opinion on, or if you might disagree, I highly recommend, listen to the documents yourselves. They are quite interesting because there are some things in it that I didn't mention in this video. Now, if you guys haven't already, have your notifications on so you guys know when I go live, you guys know when the videos come out. join the Discord. You know, sometimes the notifications, they don't go out on YouTube. I think on YouTube, you have to do like notifications all, make sure that's checked. But if you want to make sure the notifications definitely go off, join the Discord. We do have notifications when I go live. And other than that, guys, I hope you guys have a good one. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a good one. We're going to be covering Lori Vallow's opening statements next Monday. It's going to be, I think it's going to be an early day for us. But next Monday, April 7th, she's going to have her opening statements. Karen Reed, they're still doing the jury selection. But man, we've got a lot of stuff happening in this case. In less than a month, Kouri Richins' trial will be happening. Isn't that crazy?